All right, I want you to go ahead and step right into the shoes of a forensic investigator with me for today's explainer. We are officially opening the cold case file of the man who called himself the Zodiac. You know, for decades, this whole case has been so clouded by pop culture, amateur internet sleuthing, and wild urban legends. But our job today is a little different. We're going to strip all of that away and separate the myth from the hard, physical evidence. We're going to look at exactly what this unidentified killer left behind, and more importantly, how that tangible evidence actually stacks up against the men accused of being him.
Okay, so let's quickly run through our agenda for today's investigation. We're going to work logically here. First, we'll map out the unsolved crime scenes. Then we'll dive into gathering physical evidence. After that, we're decrypting the taunts. And finally, the really big one, suspects versus the evidence.
Starting with Section 1. The unsolved crime scenes, where the killer actually struck. Because to understand this guy, we first have to ground ourselves in exactly where and how he operated.
Let's look at the timeline, and as you'll see, this builds into a pretty terrifying pattern really fast. The very first confirmed attack happens on a dark dirt road in Vallejo, California, on December 20th, 1968. Teenagers David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen are shot and tragically killed near their parked car at Lake Herman Road. Then, exactly 6 months later, July 4th, 1969, he strikes again at Blue Rock Springs. He shoots another couple in a parked car. Darlene Fern dies, but Michael Maggio miraculously survives. But then, in September 1969, the geography and the whole method suddenly shift. Up at Lake Berryessa, he approaches Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard in broad daylight. He ties them up and stabs them repeatedly. Shepard tragically dies, Hartnell actually survives. And finally, October 11th, 1969, we see a massive departure. He shoots a lone cab driver, Paul Stein, right in the head in the busy residential neighborhood of Presidio Heights in San Francisco.
Now, I really want you to notice the stark contrast between these two realities. Over on the left is our physical reality. Investigators only ever officially confirmed 7 victims attacked, 5 of whom died. But over on the right, well, that's the psychological narrative the killer tried to spin for the public. By his final confirmed letter in 1974, the Zodiac was out there claiming he had murdered 37 people. This massive gap between the forensic reality and his grandiose claims, that's our first huge clue into his absolutely desperate need for infamy.
Let's move to Section 2, gathering physical evidence, the tangible trail. Because despite slipping through the cracks every single time, he wasn't a ghost, right? He did leave a physical trail behind.
Let's meticulously catalog what he actually left us. From that very first night on Lake Herman Road, investigators recovered some highly specific .22 caliber Winchester Western Super X shell casings, which were likely fired from a J.C. Higgins semi-automatic pistol. Then, thanks to survivor Michael Mageau from the second attack, police were actually able to build a pretty detailed composite sketch of the shooter. Up at Lake Berryessa, the killer literally left his own handwriting. He took a marker and wrote a summary of the attack, complete with the dates of his previous killings, directly onto Brian Hartnell's car door. And honestly, the most chilling piece of all, after the murder of cab driver Paul Stein, a blood-stained piece of Stein's shirt was physically cut out and mailed directly to the San Francisco Chronicle as morbid proof.
But here is the thing that made profiling this guy literally a nightmare for law enforcement. His modus operandi, his MO, varied wildly. Usually, serial killers have a very distinct signature or preferred method. The Zodiac? He starts out by shooting couples in secluded, parked cars. But then, at Lake Berryessa, he introduces this completely bizarre theatrical element, stabbing his victims while wearing a black executioner-style hood featuring a cross-circle bib. It's like something out of a movie. Then, just weeks later, he completely abandons all that theatricality to shoot a lone cab driver in a busy residential neighborhood. It was chaotic, it was unpredictable, and for the police, it was entirely unprecedented.
So, on to Section 3, decrypting the taunts, letters to the press. Since his physical methods were jumping all over the place, investigators had to turn to his unprecedented communications to figure him out. He wrote, quote, "Dear editor, I am the killer of the 2 teenagers. This is the Zodiac speaking," unquote. Those words showed up in the mail just weeks after the second attack. He didn't just confess, though. He commanded attention. He basically demanded that these cryptograms he included be published right on the front page of the newspapers. And his leverage? A threat to go on a massive weekend killing spree if they refused. When amateur codebreakers finally cracked his first cipher, they found a really chilling motive. He claimed he actually enjoyed killing, and that he was busy collecting his victims to be, quote, slaves for the afterlife.
But it was his next code that became truly legendary in the true crime world. Let's break down this timeline, because it's wild. Step 1. In November 1969, he mails out a 340-character cipher, explicitly claiming it contains his real identity. Step 2. That cipher sits entirely unsolved for an astounding 51 years. Think about that. Half a century of frustrating the smartest analysts in the world. Step 3. Finally, in December 2020, a team of independent codebreakers using advanced computer-assisted methods actually cracked the thing. But Step 4, well, here is the twist. The translation revealed absolutely no name. None. It was just more of his dark bravado, basically mundane ramblings about how he wasn't afraid of the gas chamber because he believed he'd have more slaves waiting for him in the afterlife. There was no real confession, just a killer thoroughly enjoying his own sick psychological game.
And yet, the game actually isn't entirely over. Despite that massive, incredible breakthrough in 2020, there is still one cipher, the Z13, that remains totally unsolved to this very day. It's tiny. It's only 13 characters long, but it is the one specific code where he promised to reveal his actual name.
Which brings us to Section 4, Suspects versus the Evidence, Testing the Theories. So the absolute crucial point of all this is, how do the men actually suspected of being this killer hold up when we apply the scientific method?
Let's put these official theories to the test. Over the years, people have built some really compelling circumstantial cases. Take Arthur Lee Allen, for example. He's the only suspect ever officially named by police. He was a Vallejo teacher, and his own friends claimed he literally joked about being the Zodiac. The police searched his home multiple times. But look at the forensic reality on the right. Decades later, actual DNA testing conducted on the killer's letters did not match Arthur Lee Allen, period. Or look at Gary France's post. This was a name brought forward in 2021 by an investigative team that relied super heavily on circumstantial and witness claims. But the forensic reality? Completely unproven. There is absolutely no definitive physical match linking him to those crime scenes. Then there's Lawrence Kane, who is strongly investigated by authorities. They actually compared his fingerprints directly to the ones pulled from the Zodiac scenes. The forensic reality there? His fingerprints ultimately did not match. It happens time and time again. These incredibly compelling narratives completely fall apart when you rigorously test them against the definitive DNA and fingerprint evidence.
And honestly, that leads us right to this genuinely staggering number, 2,500. Over the decades, more than 2,500 men have been formally investigated as possible suspects for the Zodiac killings. 2,500 men were analyzed, interviewed, or tracked down by police, and out of all of them, not a single one has ever yielded a definitive fingerprint or DNA match to the physical evidence left behind at those crime scenes.
And I think this brilliantly illustrates the haunting reality of this entire case file. Somewhere in Northern California back in 1969, a man managed to walk right into a police station's blind spot, and he just never walked back out into the light. He left behind shell casings, bloody fabric, his own handwriting, and that creepy cross circle symbol. But he left no name. So he just sits there in a cold case file, waiting for someone, somewhere, to finally finish the story he started. So I'll leave you with this question today, looking at all the evidence, the shifting MO, the codes. If you were the lead code breaker right now, do you think you would have caught him? Well, if stepping into the shoes of a forensic investigator today kept you on the edge of your seat, you know exactly what to do. Subscribe and make sure to join us for our next explainer.